They thought I was fading. They spoke about me, my health, my memory, my will, as if I were a dying lamp in the corner of a room, flickering, barely holding on. But I wasn't dying. I was listening. At 76, people assume you stop paying attention. They see the slowness in your hands and decide it's the mind that's slowing. They hear you pause before answering and mistake it for confusion, not the simple right to think. My children, Adam and Livia, built their own kind of confidence on that illusion. They mistook my silence for weakness. They mistook my patience for surrender. They waited for me to die so they could inherit. I waited for them to lie. That morning, the air in the house felt too still, the way it does right before rain. I sat at the kitchen table, pouring tea the way my late husband, Henry, always liked. Strong enough to wake the dead, he'd say. His chair across from me stayed empty. It's been empty for 11 years, and yet sometimes I still glance at it, expecting him to lift an eyebrow and whisper, "Don't let them walk over you, Margaret." I wish he were here now. At 9:17 sharp, the phone rang. Adam always called at the same time, as though I were one of his scheduled business tasks. I let it ring twice before picking up. "Mom, how are you feeling today?" Not, "How are you?" Not, "Did you sleep?" Not, "Are you lonely?" Just, "How are you feeling?" That question, repeated daily, was never about me. It was about my medical prognosis, my longevity, the timeline between now and when they could put their hands on the house and the land Henry and I spent 42 years paying off. "I'm feeling fine, Adam," I answered, watching a single leaf tremble outside the window. "Just made tea." A pause. Papers shuffled. He always did that when he was waiting for a chance to ask what he really wanted. "And the doctor's appointment tomorrow. You remember the time, right?" There it was, their favorite prophecy. The day my mind would fail. "I remember," I said. "My memory's not gone yet." He laughed softly, the way people laugh when they think they're being patient with a child. "Of course, Mom. Just checking." We hung up after 2 minutes. His limit, I suppose. I stared at the phone a while afterward. In the early years after Henry died, Adam used to stay on the line just to hear my voice. He'd ask about the garden, the neighbors, even the stray cat that lived under my porch. Now he called the way people tap the barometer before a storm. Half an hour later, Livia arrived. She never knocked anymore. She just walked in, calling my name in a tone too bright, too rehearsed. "Mother? I brought you the vitamins I told you about." She placed the bottle on the counter as if offering charity. She'd been doing that often, bringing medications I didn't need, then telling me how confusing prescriptions could become at your age. I watched her move around my kitchen, inspecting things with the practiced eye of someone measuring future value. Her gaze lingered on the antique oak cabinet Henry built with his own hands. She touched its door gently, too gently, the way someone might test the quality of an object they didn't yet own. "I've been thinking," she began, almost casually. "Have you considered moving somewhere easier? A community, maybe? A place where you'd have help?" There it was. Again. "I don't need help," I said quietly. She smiled the thin, polite smile of a woman who believes she knows better. "Mother, you live alone. The stairs are steep. The garden is too much work, and the house, well, it's too big for one person." "And perfect for two?" I asked. Her smile froze. She hadn't expected me to say that. "I didn't mean, yes, you did." Her eyes flickered, not with guilt, but calculation. That was the moment I knew. They weren't waiting for my death out of cruelty. They were waiting out of convenience, waiting for life to hand them what they didn't want to earn. After she left, the house fell into a silence so thick I could almost taste it. I sat on the edge of Henry's empty chair, pressing my fingers to the wood he once sanded smooth. "They're circling," I whispered to no one. A gust of wind rattled the windows. For the first time in months, I felt something sharp awaken inside me. Not anger, but clarity. A straightening of my spine. A return to the woman I once was. The one who worked night shifts, buried a husband, raised 2 children, and never once let life break her. Let them think I'm fading. Let them think I'm slow. Let them think they're winning. Because I know something they don't. I've been waiting for the moment they cross the line, and when they do, I'll be ready. I knew something was wrong the moment Adam pulled into my driveway that afternoon. He never came without calling first. His visits were usually as predictable as his monthly budgeting meetings, scheduled, efficient, emotionally hollow. But that day, his car door slammed hard, like he was bracing himself for a task he didn't want to perform. He walked in without waiting for me to answer the door. They'd both stopped waiting for that, I noticed. "Mom," he said, too cheerfully, rubbing his hands together the way he did when he was nervous. "Thought I'd check on you. See how you're holding up." "Still alive," I answered. And for a moment, he blinked, unsure whether I was joking or reminding him of something he didn't want to admit. He followed me into the living room, his eyes sweeping the shelves, the fireplace, the framed photographs. I recognized the look. It was the same one Lydia had worn that morning. A kind of quiet inventory, a silent counting of assets. His gaze landed on the cedar chest in the corner, the one Henry built 50 years ago. I felt my jaw tighten. He cleared his throat. "So, Mom, about your paperwork." There it was. He hadn't even bothered to dress it up this time. "What paperwork, Adam?" "The usual things. House documents, banking info, medical directives." His voice softened, falsely gentle. "It's important to have those ready, just in case." "Just in case I die," he meant. I lowered myself into Henry's old chair, the leather sighing under my weight. "Why are you so interested?" "Interested? Mom, please, don't make it sound sinister." But it was sinister. His eyes were too bright, too alert. He wasn't here to see how I was. He was here to see how much time he needed to wait. He sat across from me, leaning forward with a practiced sincerity. "It's just that, with your memory slipping—" "What memory?" I asked quietly. He stopped. A flicker of irritation crossed his face, quick but visible. "Well, Livia says many things," I said. He paused again. I could almost see the edges of his strategy unraveling. Half-truths only work when the listener doubts herself. But I hadn't started doubting yet. He shifted tactics. "Mom, this house is too big for you. You shouldn't be living alone. Something could happen." "A fall? A fracture? Then why are you worried about paperwork?" I asked, "and not installing railings or fixing the porch?" His mouth opened slowly, like he hadn't expected logic from someone my age. He leaned back, arms crossed, his face settling into a tight, polite smile. "You're being difficult." "No," I said. "I'm being alive." He sighed loudly, as though the weight of my continued breathing was a burden on his shoulders. Then he stood, pacing the length of the rug Henry brought me from New Mexico on our 20th anniversary. "You know," he said, stopping near the window. "Livia and we've talked. We're worried. Maybe we should help you organize things. You know, before something happens. Before something." before me. "Adam," I said, "look at me." He did. His eyes were tired, restless, hungry for something he thought he deserved. "You don't need my help," I continued. "You need access." He inhaled sharply, his nostrils flaring, not in guilt but in offense at being understood so easily. "That's unfair, Mom." "No," I said softly. "What's unfair is being treated like I've already 1 foot in the grave." He didn't deny it. He didn't need to. Then something unexpected happened. He walked toward the stairs. "Is that safe for you, Mom?" he asked suddenly, voice dripping with concern. "You know, navigating all those steps. Maybe I should take some things downstairs, or look around, see what you keep there. We need to evaluate." Evaluate. I stood quickly, faster than he expected for a woman slipping in mind and body. "You will not go upstairs," I said. He froze, surprised at the steel in my voice. I stepped toward him until he had to look down to meet my eyes. "You are a guest in this house. My house. When I need your help, I'll ask for it. Until then, you will not touch a single drawer." He stared at me, anger simmering beneath a mask of polite concern. And then he said something that told me exactly where this was headed. "Mom, you're starting to sound confused." Ah, there it was. The first lie. The first brick in the wall they planned to build around me. I felt something cold settle into place. Not fear, not grief. Just certainty. They had crossed the line, and they didn't even realize it yet. The house always feels different after someone leaves it with bad intentions. The air thickens, the corners darken. Even the floorboards seem to remember the weight of unwelcome footsteps. After Adam drove off, tires spitting gravel, I stood in the hallway listening to the silence he left behind. It wasn't peaceful, it was bruised. I walked slowly to the living room and sat in Henry's chair. It still held the ghost of his warmth, or maybe I only wished it did. I rested my hands in my lap. They trembled slightly, not from fear, but from restraint. There is a kind of trembling that belongs not to weakness, but to a woman trying very hard not to break something. I had suspected their intentions for months, but suspicion is fog. It blurs. That afternoon, the fog lifted, and the shapes in it became clear. My children were not waiting for my well-being. They were waiting for my absence. I sat there for a long time, staring at the window where the light had begun to fade. The sun dipped lower, slicing the living room into 2 halves, one warm, one cold. Funny how grief always sits in the colder one. When the phone rang, I didn't jump. I simply waited for the second ring, the way I used to when Henry called during his lunch breaks, so I wouldn't sound too eager. It was Livia. "Mother," she began, voice coated in sugar, the way icing hides a dry cake. "Adam says you seemed unsettled today." Unsettled. There was the second lie, soft but pointed, like a thumb pressing against a bruise. "I'm fine," I said. "Well," she continued, "Adam is just worried. We both are. You've been, how to put it, more emotional lately." I looked around the room as if searching for the woman she was describing. Emotional? I hadn't cried in front of either of them in years. Emotion was a luxury I had learned to spend sparingly. "What exactly did he tell you?" I asked. She exhaled dramatically, as though the weight of my existence pressed upon her delicate shoulders. "He said you forgot your doctor's appointment time and that you accused him of trying to enter your private things." I closed my eyes. There it was. The blooming of their narrative. I pictured them discussing me over dinner. Livia slicing her fork through a salad as if dissecting my sanity. Adam nodding, satisfied by the story growing between them. Mother is slipping. Mother is confused. Mother needs help we should control. A story is easier to tell than a truth. None of that happened, I said. Silence. Then, Mother, memory changes are normal at your age. I felt anger rise slowly, not hot, but cold, like ice forming beneath the skin. Livia, I said quietly, do you hear yourself? Yes, she replied quickly, too quickly. And I hope you hear me, because Adam and I are on the same page. We don't want things to get complicated later. Complicated. Another word that meant something different depending on who said it. For whom? I asked. For all of us, she answered, which told me it was for none of us. Not really. It was for them. We ended the call with brittle politeness. After I hung up, I sat there in the fading light, letting the quiet press against me. The house seemed to listen, waiting to see what I would do next. I could have cried. I could have called a friend. I could have tried, yet again, to convince myself I was imagining things. But age sharpens some truths, even as it dulls others. I stood and walked into the kitchen, my steps steady. I opened the drawer beneath the stove, the one nobody ever thought to open. Inside was a small notebook, leather-bound, the color of old leaves. I placed it on the table and took a pen, not for a will, not for instructions, but for the truth. Every word they said today, every lie they planted, every shift in tone, every glance, every attempt to steer the conversation where they wanted it. I wrote it all down. Not because I was confused, not because I was scared, but because one day soon they would claim I remembered things wrong, and I wanted proof that I hadn't. As I finished, the last bit of evening light slipped away, leaving the house in a soft, honest darkness. I closed the notebook gently. They thought they were preparing their case. What they didn't know was that I had already begun preparing mine. The next morning arrived with the kind of pale, colorless light that makes everything look older. Walls, furniture, faces. I stood at the bathroom mirror brushing my hair, watching the way the silver strands caught the dull glow. 76 years staring back at me, but the eyes were still mine. Clear, sharp, not confused, not fading. At 11, I had my appointment with Dr. Hawthorne. I didn't want to go, not after the way Adam had spoken about it, as if the appointment were less about my health and more about gathering evidence against me. But avoiding it would feed their story, and I was not here to make their lies easier. I arrived early. I always do. People think age makes you slow. It only makes you deliberate. The waiting room smelled faintly of disinfectant and wilted magazines. A young couple sat across from me, whispering excitedly about a baby on the way. I envied them, not their youth, not their hope, but the simplicity of believing that the future belongs to you. When my name was called, I stood without help. The nurse smiled in that bright, pitying way some young women do when they see an elderly person walking alone. Doctor. Hawthorne looked up from his clipboard as I entered. A kind man, but overworked. He motioned me to sit. Well, Margaret, he said, how have you been feeling? Fine, I answered. I sleep. I eat. I remember my own name and the names of the people who try to take my house. He blinked, unsure whether to laugh. I didn't. He adjusted his glasses. Your son called yesterday. He mentioned some concerns. I inhaled slowly. Of course he did. What concerns? I asked. Dr. Hawthorne flipped through his notes. He said you've been forgetful, agitated, that you accused him of things that didn't happen. The room felt colder. Not because of the thermostat, but because it's one thing to suspect betrayal and another to see it written in ink on a doctor's chart. I see, I said. He leaned forward, kind but cautious. Margaret, these things happen with age. It doesn't mean anything is seriously wrong, but it helps if family keeps an eye out. Doctor, I said quietly, may I ask you something? Of course. If someone lies often enough about a person's mind, eventually, will everyone believe it? He hesitated. It depends on the situation. I nodded. Would you say my mind seems unstable today? He studied me carefully, the way my hands rested still on my lap, the steadiness of my voice, the clarity in my eyes. No, he said finally. You seem perfectly lucid. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. For a moment, we sat in silence. Then he added, almost gently, families worry, Margaret. Sometimes they misinterpret things. Sometimes they plan them, I murmured. He didn't ask me to explain. Perhaps he didn't want to know. The appointment ended without incident. My vitals were good, my memory tests sharp. I left with a slip of paper confirming what I already knew. I was not slipping. But someone wanted it to look that way. Outside, the wind cut through my coat as I stepped into the gray afternoon. The parking lot was half empty, dotted with old leaves skidding across the asphalt. I reached my car, unlocked the door, and paused. A message from Livia blinked on my phone. Mom, doctor's office said you were confused again. We need to talk tonight. Again. They were building a narrative brick by brick, even when the mortar didn't hold. I didn't reply. Instead, I sat in the car for a few minutes, letting the engine warm and my thoughts settle. Slow, deliberate, the way frost settles on glass. I thought of Henry, of the way he'd squeeze my hand when I doubted myself, of how he'd laugh and say, "You're the strongest person I know, Margaret. Don't ever let them forget it." They had forgotten, but I hadn't. When I pulled into my driveway, the house looked different again. Not colder this time, but watchful. As if it, too, had realized something. They weren't just circling. They were preparing to strike. And now, so was I. The trouble with being older isn't the stiffness in the mornings or the ache in your knees when the weather turns. No, the real trouble is how easily people begin to assume they know what's best for you. As if age were a dimming of truth, not a sharpening of it. As if the years I lived somehow count for less than the years they might. That evening, after Livia's message, I made myself a simple dinner. Soup with vegetables and a piece of bread I toasted too long. I ate at the small kitchen table, the one Henry and I bought at a flea market 40 years ago. He sanded it himself, rubbed it with beeswax until it glowed. Even now, in the humblest light, it held something warm. I touched the wood with my fingertips. "Stay with me," I whispered to the empty room, not to the table, to myself. Around 7, I heard tires on gravel. Slow, hesitant. They hadn't even bothered to coordinate their entrance this time. Adam's car first, then Livia's, less than a minute later. Like two vultures who pretend they're flying separately, but always land on the same tree. I didn't open the door for them. I waited until the bell rang. When I finally stepped aside, they both entered at once, two shadows stretching across my hallway. "Mom?" Livia began immediately, breathless with manufactured worry. "We talked to your doctor." I set my jaw. "I know." Adam stepped closer. "He said you were defensive." Defensive. the third lie wrapped in a neat ribbon. I answered his questions, I said, calmly. Livia pursed her lips the way she always did when the world refused to match the story in her head. Mom, we're concerned. You sounded confused on the phone yesterday. Confused about what? I asked. They exchanged a glance. Quick, sharp, coordinated. That's not the point, Adam said. The point is, it's getting harder for you. I moved to the living room so I wouldn't have to look at them too closely. They followed, like lawyers entering a courtroom they assumed they'd already won. Livia sat on the edge of the sofa, posture perfect. We think it's time to discuss long-term care. There it was, the phrase. It fell into the room like a stone dropped into still water. I don't need long-term care, I said. Adam leaned against the fireplace, folding his arms. Mom, the house is too much. You forget things. You misplace things. You get overwhelmed. I stared at him. Name one thing I misplaced. Another glance passed between them. A silent agreement. They had rehearsed this. Your keys, Livia said softly. A bill, Adam added. And you seemed upset yesterday when Adam asked to help with paperwork. Upset? No. Angry? Yes. But anger is not confusion. Anger is clarity-seeking air. Mother, Livia continued gently, we're not trying to hurt you. We're trying to protect you. Protect. A word that has been misused more times than truth itself. Protect me from what? I asked. They looked almost relieved, as if I had just opened a door they'd been waiting to walk through. From making mistakes, Adam said. From being taken advantage of. From yourself, even. And there it was, the quiet, final strike. Not the accusation, the assumption. They believed they had reached the point where they could paint me as a woman unfit to make her own decisions. A woman slipping. A woman diminished. Their mother in name, but not in competence. I folded my hands in my lap. They didn't tremble. Is that why you asked the doctor about cognitive evaluations? I said. Adam stiffened. Livia blinked. You spoke to him? She asked. Yes. And what did he say? Adam demanded. That I was lucid. Silence. Not the polite kind. Not even the guilty kind. Just a sudden tightening in the air. The onset of panic smashed down with control. Well, Livia said quickly, one good day doesn't mean... I've had many good days, I interrupted. Mom, Adam said, we aren't trying to argue. We're trying to help. And if you don't want to go to a community, at least let us organize your documents. Your will. Your accounts. It's irresponsible not to. My throat tightened, not with fear, but with revelation. They no longer cared whether the story was convincing. They only cared whether it was useful. I rose, slowly, deliberately. You will not touch my documents, I said. Livia stood, hands raised as though soothing a startled animal. Mother, please. No, I said softly. You came here with a plan. You came here with assumptions. And you came here believing I wouldn't notice. Adam's voice cracked. We're trying to prevent things from getting out of control. I looked at him. Really looked at him. He didn't see me. He saw a door. He saw what lay behind it. I see, I whispered. And what exactly do you think is about to get out of control? Neither answered. They didn't need to. They already believed the lie. Or maybe they had simply grown comfortable telling it. When they finally left, the house felt lighter, not because they were gone, but because something inside me had settled. Not grief, not anger, resolve. They weren't circling anymore. They were closing in, and I was done letting them sharpen their knives in my home. The next morning, The sky was the color of dishwater, flat, heavy, undecided, as though even the weather couldn't be bothered to take a side. I sat at the table with a cup of tea cooling between my palms. I wasn't drinking it. I just needed something warm to hold while I thought. There comes a point in life when you recognize the exact moment the balance shifts. When you stop hoping someone will treat you well and start preparing for the fact that they won't. Yesterday had been that moment. The house felt different when I walked through it. Not wounded the way it had been after Adam's last visit. No. This time it felt awake, as though the walls themselves were urging me to move, to act, to stop waiting for their next attempt to help. I went upstairs, my steps slow but firm. The hallway smelled faintly of lavender from the sachets Henry used to tuck into my drawers. I paused at the door of the small room that once belonged to our daughter, who never lived longer than 3 days. We never turned it into anything else. Grief keeps certain rooms locked. But today wasn't about grief. Today was about preparation. I went into the study instead, a narrow room with a window overlooking the yard and the old pear tree Henry planted the year Adam was born. The desk was cluttered with envelopes, pens, bills, ordinary things. Harmless things. But under the surface, everything had begun to shift. I pulled out the leather notebook where I'd written down the lies they'd told, each one dated with care. Evidence, not memory. I added 2 more lines from last night's visit, writing slowly, deliberately. My handwriting was still steady. I felt a small pulse of satisfaction at that. When I closed the notebook, my eyes drifted to the phone on the desk. It was time. I dialed the number I had written on a scrap of paper months ago, back when I first felt that tickle at the edge of intuition, the sense that trouble was coming. I hadn't called then. I hadn't wanted to believe it. A woman answered. Law offices of Porter and Wills. How may I assist you? My name is Margaret Grace, I said. I'd like to schedule a consultation this week, if possible. Her voice warmed. We can fit you in tomorrow at 11. Is that manageable? Manageable. I smiled faintly. Yes, thank you. When I hung up, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady, like my feet had finally found the right place on the ground. I spent the rest of the morning sorting my papers, not for them, but for myself. Bank statements, house deeds, insurance files, Henry's pension documents. I placed everything into neat stacks, each labeled with a yellow sticky note. I wasn't preparing to justify anything to anyone. I was preparing to protect what I had spent a lifetime building. Around noon, the phone rang again. Livia. I let it ring until it stopped. A minute later, a message arrived. Mother, we want to come by tonight. We need to settle the situation before it gets out of hand. Out of hand. The phrase made me laugh softly, without humor. Whose hand? I placed the phone face down. Let them wait. Let them stew in their certainty that I would bend, that I would soften, that I would forget the tone Adam used, or the tight, eager way Livia spoke about long-term options. Let them think I was still the mother who always gave, always forgave, always folded myself smaller to keep the peace. They didn't know that something inside me had begun to lift its head again. The part of me Henry trusted, the part that had survived everything life threw at us. In the quiet of that gray afternoon, I opened the window. A cold wind swept in, carrying the scent of earth and rain. It felt almost like a reminder. You are not powerless. I closed the window gently. Tomorrow I would speak to the lawyer. Tomorrow I would begin the work of protecting myself. But tonight, I would do something even more important. I would stop being afraid of my own children. I barely slept that night. Not from fear. Fear has a louder shape. This was something quieter, thinner, like a thread pulled taut somewhere inside my ribs. Each time I drifted off, I saw Adam's face, Livia's careful smile, the way they exchanged glances as if I were a fragile object they were assessing for cracks. By morning, the tension had settled into a calmness I almost didn't recognize. A steadiness. The same steadiness I felt the day Henry and I signed the mortgage papers and the banker looked at us as if we wouldn't make it. We did. I would make it now, too. I arrived at the lawyer's office 15 minutes early. I've never liked rushing. It creates mistakes, and I was done with mistakes. The lobby smelled of old carpet and fresh ink. A young receptionist offered water. I declined. When Mr. Porter finally stepped out, he was not at all what I expected. He was in his early 60s, with a gentle posture, a careful way of speaking, the kind of man who listened before he decided what he thought. These days that was rare. We sat across from each other in a small office lined with books. "What can I help you with, Mrs. Grace?" It was the first time in months someone had said my name without a sigh afterward. I opened my notebook, the pages filled with my tight handwriting. "I believe my children are planning to have me declared incapable of managing my own affairs." He didn't flinch. That helped. "What makes you suspect that?" he asked. I told him. Not everything. There are memories a mother keeps to herself. But enough. How they talked about me as though I weren't in the room. How they twisted simple disagreements into signs of decline. How they pressed for documents, access, power. How they lied to my doctor. When I finished, he tapped his pen thoughtfully. "This is more common than you might think," he said gently. "People underestimate how often older adults are targeted by their own relatives." I exhaled. I didn't know I'd been holding that breath. He continued. "You seem perfectly competent, and the law allows you to protect yourself long before anything escalates." He outlined the options. A revocable trust, a durable power of attorney assigned to someone neutral, a medical directive naming who couldn't speak for me, a will revision that removed anyone acting under coercion or manipulation, each document a shield, each signature a boundary. "Your children cannot override your decisions if you've made them before they act," he said. "But timing is important. You must prepare now, not later." I nodded. I had known that before I walked in. "Are you ready to begin?" he asked. I was, more than I had expected. We spent the next hour reviewing my assets, my home, Henry's pension, the insurance he left behind. I signed the first round of paperwork with a hand that didn't shake. Not once. When it was done, Mr. Porter escorted me to the door. "You're not alone in this," he said kindly. I didn't answer, but something inside me loosened, just a little. Outside, the sky had finally cleared. A thin thread of sun touched the pavement. I drove home slowly, not in a hurry. The house greeted me with its familiar quiet. I set my purse on the table, removed my coat, and breathed in the scent of my own home. Dust, old wood, lavender from the upstairs hallway. My phone was blinking. 7 missed calls. 3 from Adam. 4 from Livia. A message from Adam read, "Mom, we're coming tonight. We need to resolve this." "You're making things worse." Worse. Another word that meant nothing and everything. I didn't reply. Instead, I walked to the window. The pear tree swayed gently, as if bowing. "I'm not afraid of them," I whispered. And for the first time, it was true. The wind rustled the branches, tapping against the glass like a quiet agreement. Tonight, they would come again. Tonight, they would try to push harder. But tonight, for the first time, I would not meet them as the mother they remembered. I would meet them as the woman they forgot I was. They arrived just after sunset, the hour when the house turns soft and shadows lengthen across the floorboards, like thin fingers reaching for something they shouldn't touch. I heard their cars before I saw their faces, Adam's engine too loud, Livia's too smooth. Two different lives, same intention. I didn't open the door right away. Let them wait, I thought. Let them stand there with their urgency and their plans, believing they were the ones in control. When I finally unlocked it, Adam rushed in first, irritation already pinching the corners of his mouth. Livia followed, her expression composed, as if she had practiced it in the car. "Mom?" Adam began. "What is going on with you lately?" I stepped aside, letting their voices echo down the hallway. They filled my house so easily, as though it already belonged to them. "What do you mean?" I asked, settling into my usual chair. Livia removed her gloves one finger at a time. "You're avoiding calls, ignoring messages, acting unpredictably." Unpredictably. That made me smile. "I've been busy," I said. They exchanged a look. They were getting better at that. The silent coordination, the orchestration of concern. Adam leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Busy with what?" "Mom, you don't have obligations anymore. You shouldn't be handling things alone." I let the words sit in the air, their shape familiar. You shouldn't. You can't. You're not able. Each sentence another beam in the box they were building around me. Livia sat up straighter. "Mother, we think it's time to talk about formal arrangements." "Arrangements for what?" I asked. "For your care," she said, gently enough that a stranger might have mistaken it for love. Adam added, "We've spoken with someone, a professional, someone who can help evaluate what kind of support you need." There it was, the professional, the test, the beginning of the end they hoped for. "And who is this person?" I asked. Livia hesitated. "A social worker. She has experience assessing cognitive issues." So they had escalated. They were ready to document their version of me, ready to gather evidence, ready to make their lie official. "When is she coming?" I asked. Adam smiled, almost relieved. "Tonight, she's in the car." For a moment, the house felt utterly still. Even the clock on the mantel seemed to stop ticking. "You brought her here without asking me?" I said. "We didn't want you to get anxious," Livia explained. "Surprises can be difficult at your age." I breathed in slowly. It tasted like cold stone. "Bring her in," I said. That surprised them. Adam blinked, then nodded and left. Livia watched me with the careful expression of someone studying a creature they expect to snap at any moment. When they returned, the woman following them looked younger than I expected. Mid-30s, neat bun, clipboard pressed to her chest like a shield. "Mrs. Grace?" she greeted politely. "I'm here for a routine wellness consultation." "Routine for whom?" I asked. Her smile faltered, but only slightly. She sat across from me, pen ready, eyes bright with professional neutrality. "Do you mind if I ask you a few questions?" "No," I said, folding my hands. "Ask." The questions began simple: my name, the date, the address. I answered clearly. Her pen scratched the paper faster with each response, and I could feel Adam shift beside her, restless. Then she asked, "Do you feel safe living alone?" I looked at my children. "Safer than I do with company." Her eyes flickered, For a moment, she understood. Next question. Do you ever feel confused by household tasks? No, I said, but others seem confused about whose household this is. Adam exhaled loudly. Mom, stop being combative. I'm being truthful, I replied. The social worker tried another angle. Do you manage your finances independently? Very much so, Adam cut in. She's been struggling, actually, misplacing bills, forgetting payments. Which bills? I asked quietly. He went silent. Livia jumped in. Mother, don't make this harder. But it wasn't hard. It was simple. The social worker flipped a page. One last question, Mrs. Grace. Has anyone pressured you regarding your decisions recently? I didn't look at her. I looked directly at my children. Yes, I said. My family. The woman froze. Completely. She glanced at Adam, then Livia, then back at me. Something had changed in her face. Very subtly. The quiet detection of a crack in the story she'd been fed. Thank you, she said softly. That's all for now. She stood, excused herself, and walked out. Adam followed her, whispering urgently. Livia stayed behind, her smile thin as wire. You're making this very difficult, she said. No, I replied. I'm making it clear. When their cars finally drove away, the night outside deepened. Darker, but somehow freer. They thought the assessment would weaken me. What they didn't know was that every lie they told became another piece of truth I could use. The house felt taller when they were gone. For the first time, I felt it. They had stepped fully into the trap, and they didn't even see it. The house held its breath after they left, not because of fear, no. Fear had long since drained from these walls, but because something had shifted. A small, decisive click, like the turn of a key in a lock. They had crossed a line, and the social worker had seen it. Not all of it, but enough. Still, the night left me restless. I moved from room to room, touching the edges of furniture the way some women touch the edges of memories. Henry's photograph on the mantel, the cardigan I'd draped over the armchair earlier, the old lamp with the dented shade. All these pieces of my life, these quiet witnesses, had seen who I truly was. My children could not erase that, no matter how loudly they insisted on a new version of me. Later, much later, when the house had fallen into full darkness, I heard it. A car door closing, soft steps on gravel, a voice too low to make out. I moved to the hallway silently, the way older women learn to move when the world has taught them not to disturb anyone. I stood by the window and waited for my eyes to adjust. Adam's silhouette emerged first, pacing near the mailbox. Then Livia joined him, her arms wrapped around herself. Her voice drifted in fragments through the glass. Not enough. She's sharper than before. We need consistency. She slipped once, she'll slip again. We can't wait forever. They weren't whispering because they feared waking me. They were whispering because they feared being overheard by anyone else. I watched them the way a hunter watches the fox circle its own trap. Livia said something then, something that froze the air between us, even though they had no idea I was listening. She won't give us anything willingly. We'll have to push harder. She'll break eventually. They always do. They. Her mother was now part of a category. Adam exhaled sharply. We need to speed this up. If she changes her will, we're finished. There it was. The truth glinting like a blade in moonlight. This wasn't about my safety. It wasn't about confusion or care or concern. It was about timing. I stepped back from the window, heart steady. not racing, not trembling. A strange calm washed over me, the kind that arrives when the last piece of doubt disappears. They had said the words. They had revealed themselves fully, and they had no idea their voices carried farther than they meant. I went upstairs quietly, opened my notebook, and wrote down every sentence I'd overheard. My handwriting remained neat, unwavering. Evidence is only useful when it's clear. When I closed the notebook, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not sorrow, not anger, power. They thought I would break. But the truth is, I had already bent as far as I ever would. When their cars finally pulled away, their headlights cutting briefly across my walls, I sat at the kitchen table in the dark. The moonlight touched my hands, silvering the knuckles. They always do, Livia had said. She was wrong. They hadn't met a woman like me yet. Morning arrived without color, just a pale wash of light that slid across the floorboards and stopped at my feet, like it wasn't sure it had permission to enter. I sat with my tea, holding the cup the way one holds a hand that used to comfort them. My house felt different now, not frightened, not tense, alert, like a dog raising its head at a distant sound. I knew they would come again. People don't speak the way my children spoke last night and simply stop. I spent the morning sorting papers, not out of panic, but out of purpose. Mr. Porter had been clear. Documentation is armor. I placed my bills and statements into neat stacks, labeled them, and set aside the signed forms that ensured neither of my children could make medical decisions for me again. It felt like smoothing wrinkles out of a dress. Small motions, steadying motions. Around noon, I stepped outside to check the mailbox. There, tucked beneath a grocery flyer, was an envelope with no stamp. No handwriting, just slipped in quietly. I opened it with my thumb. A pamphlet for a residential care community, the kind with manicured lawns and empty smiles. A sticky note was attached. They can help you before things get worse. No greeting, no explanation, just a signature that barely counted as a name. I stood in the doorway, the cold air brushing against my cheeks. So this was their next move. Pressure without presence. Suggestion disguised as kindness. I went back inside, folded the pamphlet once, twice, and dropped it into the bin. Not today. Around 4, the phone rang. Adam. I let it ring until the machine caught it. Mom? His voice came through, tight and irritated. We're coming by tonight. We need to talk about yesterday. You were difficult. We need you to cooperate. Cooperate. Another stone placed in the wall they were building. I didn't call back. The sun slid lower. The shadows grew longer. I felt a strange peace settle in, the kind that visits a person who has already accepted what must be done. When the knock came, it was softer than usual. Not the sharp, insistent pounding of righteous children. Something quieter. Measured. I opened the door to see both of them standing there. Adam with his jaw clenched, Livia with her professional smile frozen in place like frost on glass. Mom, she began, we just want to make sure you're making decisions in your best interest. My interest, I repeated. Yes, Adam said quickly. And right now, your decisions are questionable. I stepped back, letting them into the living room. But I remained standing. Sit, Livia said gently. No, I answered. You sit. They exchanged a wary glance, but obeyed. 2 children waiting for a verdict they didn't expect. We talked to the social worker, Adam began, and she said you seemed agitated, defensive, withdrawn. She said I told her I felt pressured, I replied. They froze, We're worried, Livia said too fast. You're misinterpreting things. No, I said. I'm understanding them. The stillness in the room thickened. Then I asked the question I knew would cut through every lie. What exactly do you think I'm no longer capable of? Silence. Not hesitation. Calculation. I could see it in their eyes. The version of me they had built. The one they needed. The one they were trying to convince the world existed. Finally, Adam spoke. You need oversight. Protection. Guidance. Guidance. Like I was a child wandering into traffic. And, Livia added softly, control of your estate should fall to someone who can manage it responsibly. There it was, the heart of it, the thing they had been circling for weeks. My estate. I nodded once, slowly. Thank you, I said. They both blinked. For what? Adam asked. For telling me the truth, I replied. They looked relieved for a moment, poor fools, mistaking my calm for surrender. But it wasn't surrender. It was the closing of a door inside myself, a door they would never get through again. They left shortly after, satisfied with my calmness, unaware that calmness can be the most dangerous warning a woman my age can give. I watched their cars disappear down the road, two pairs of red taillights shrinking into the dusk until they merged with the night. The house exhaled. So did I. I didn't sleep. Not really. I drifted in and out, listening to the old wood settle, to the radiator hum, to the wind brushing the gutter like fingers testing a locked door. I thought about Henry, about the promises we made to protect what we built. I thought about the notebook upstairs, the lawyer's files, the cold precision of the social worker's questions. And I thought about what came next. By morning, the sky was washed thin, pale blue, the color of worn linen. I made my tea, sat in the living room, and waited. Not for them, for myself. For the moment when a person stops being a victim in someone else's story and begins writing her own. It came sooner than I expected. At 10:30, a knock sounded on the door. Not Adam's, not Livia's. Measured, professional. I opened it to find the social worker from 2 nights ago. Mrs. Grace, she said, offering a tentative smile. May I come in? I stepped aside. She entered slowly, as though she wasn't sure which version of me she would meet. The confused woman described by my children, or the one who'd looked her in the eye and said she felt pressured. We sat in the living room. She folded her hands in her lap. I wanted to check on you personally, she said. Sometimes family dynamics complicate assessments. A gentle way of acknowledging the truth without naming it. I'm doing fine, I replied, clear-headed. I thought so, she said softly. She opened her notebook. I also wanted to clarify something. Your children contacted me again. They requested a follow-up evaluation, stating they believe you're deteriorating. I held her gaze. Do I seem deteriorated to you? Not at all. She said it with a firmness that surprised even her. But, she continued, their insistence concerns me. It suggests there may be pressure or conflict about your autonomy. Autonomy. A careful word, a legal word. I see, I said. She hesitated, then lowered her voice. Mrs. Grace, if you ever feel unsafe or manipulated, or if you suspect someone is attempting to control your decisions, you are within your rights to document it. And you can request that any evaluations go through a neutral third party, not family. I felt something warm stir inside me. Not comfort, exactly, but recognition. Someone saw me. Someone believed me. I've already begun documenting, I said quietly. Her eyebrows lifted, impressed. Good. That's wise. She closed her notebook gently. I won't file anything based on your children's claims unless I see evidence myself. And I don't. I breathed out slowly. After she left, I stood by the window, watching her walk to her car. She paused before getting in, looking back at the house, as if checking that I truly was standing strong inside it. I was. When her car disappeared around the corner, I returned to the kitchen table. The sunlight touched the wood softly, like a hand on my shoulder. My phone buzzed. Adam, we're coming by tonight. There are documents we need you to sign. It's irresponsible to delay. Documents. Of course. I set the phone down. Tonight, they would try again. Harder, now that urgency had set in. They would push. They would insist. They would corner. And tonight, for the first time, I would not simply defend myself. Tonight, I would let them reveal everything, every intention, every lie, every careless word they believed would slip past me, because after tonight, there would be no more doubt, not in them, not in me, not in anyone. Dusk arrived early that day, sliding across the floor in long, deliberate strokes, as if the light itself wanted distance from what was coming. I spent the late afternoon preparing, not the house, not the documents, not the scene, myself. I moved slowly, conserving energy the way older women do when we know the night will ask something of us. I straightened the books on the coffee table. I set 2 chairs opposite mine, angled slightly toward each other. People reveal themselves fastest when they believe they're not being watched directly. As the last light drained from the sky, I opened the window just a crack. The cold air steadied my nerves. It reminded me that breath is a choice. The knock came exactly at 7. Sharp. Controlled. Adam's knock. I let the sound hang for a moment before opening the door. Both of them entered without waiting for permission. Their faces were tight, purposeful, dressed in concern, but stitched with impatience. "Mom," Adam said, "we need to talk." "You've said that a lot lately," I replied. Livia placed a folder on the table. Thick, structured, prepared. "Sit down, Mother. Let's go through this together." I did not sit. Not yet. "What is that?" I asked. Livia exhaled with the patience of someone speaking to a stubborn patient. "These are documents to protect you, to help us help you." Adam added, "If you sign these, we can manage your bills, your medical decisions, the house, all the complicated things you shouldn't worry about. The house. Always the house." "And if I don't sign?" I asked. Their silence answered everything. I lowered myself into my chair then, slowly, deliberately. They took it as surrender. Their shoulders eased. Their tone softened. I could almost hear their thoughts. Finally, she's giving in. This will be easy. Livia opened the folder and slid the first document toward me. Just a durable power of attorney, standard. I read the first line. It gave them access to everything, my finances, my decisions, my home. I set it aside without comment. Next came a medical authorization form, naming them as my advocates. "Advocates," I murmured. "Yes," Livia said sweetly. "For when things worsen." "When?" "Not if." I slid that one aside, too. Adam's jaw clenched. "Mom, stop stalling." I looked at him then. Really looked. He couldn't meet my eyes. "You two have been planning this for a long time," I said softly. Livia stiffened. "We've been trying to keep things from getting out of control." "For you," Adam added. "We're trying to avoid a legal mess later." "A mess for whom?" I asked. They didn't answer. Instead, Adam pushed another document toward me. His hand trembled, not with fear, but urgency. "This one is the most important," he said. "It streamlines the inheritance process, simplifies everything." I picked it up, read the first paragraph, then the second. And I felt it. The turning of another key. A deeper lock. "So," I said, lowering the paper, "this is what all of this was for." Livia's mask cracked for the first time. "Mother, don't make this sound ugly." "But it is ugly," I replied. "Ugly and small and predictable." Adam leaned forward sharply. "Do you want to make this difficult? Because we will involve the courts if we have to." There it was, the threat. Softened by love, spoken in the language of concern, but a threat all the same. I folded my hands in my lap. "Adam, Livia," I said, quietly. "Tell me the truth." In one sentence. They exchanged a look, nervous, desperate, cornered. Then Adam spoke. "You cannot manage your life anymore." I nodded slowly, calmly, almost gently. "Thank you," I whispered. "For what?" Livia asked, confused. "For saying exactly what you needed to say." The clock ticked in the silence that followed. They didn't know it yet. But the moment those words left Adam's mouth, he handed me everything I needed. Proof of intent, proof of pressure, proof of the plan. Tonight, they believed they had cornered me. But they didn't realize I had been waiting for this exact sentence. And now, finally, I had it. They didn't understand right away. The sentence hung in the room like smoke, thin at first, then thickening as it settled into every corner. Adam shifted in his chair, uncomfortable, as if he felt the weight of what he'd said but couldn't yet name it. Livia, quicker at reading tone, straightened her posture, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Why are you thanking us?" she asked, suspicion sharpening each syllable. "Because," I said gently, "you've finally spoken honestly." Adam scoffed. "This again? Mom, we're trying to help." "No," I interrupted, and my voice surprised even me. Soft, but unwavering. "You're trying to take, and you thought if you wrapped it in concern, I wouldn't notice." Livia opened her mouth, closed it, then spoke through her teeth. "This is exactly what we mean. You're being irrational." I leaned back in my chair, folding my hands neatly. A woman defending her autonomy is not irrational. Silence. Heavy, pulsing silence. "You're twisting things," Adam said, a tremor in his voice now. "You're making this something it isn't." "I'm making it what it is," I replied. Livia pressed her palms against her knees. "Mother, we can't keep doing this. You refuse help. You shut us out. You question every suggestion." "Because every suggestion benefits you," I said. That stopped her. The truth is an unkind mirror. It was then, right then, that something in their faces changed. Not guilt, not regret. Calculation. A silent shift into the next phase of their plan. Livia placed her hand over the folder. "If you won't cooperate voluntarily, we'll have to explore other options." "Legal options," Adam added, gaining confidence from the phrase. "I know," I said simply. They blinked. "You know?" Adam asked. "Yes. And you're not concerned?" Livia's tone wavered, a tiny crack. I shook my head. No. It was the truth. Concern had left me days ago. In its place, preparation. The clock ticked behind us, slow, deliberate, like a heartbeat, learning to steady itself again. "Look," Adam said, trying a softer strategy. "This doesn't need to be a battle. If you sign now, everything stays simple, smooth." "For you," I said. "For everyone," he insisted. I let the lie sit between us. Then, quietly, I rose from my chair. They watched me. Two adults suddenly looking much younger than their years, unsure of the moment that was unfolding. I walked to the small cabinet beside the fireplace. Henry's cabinet, the one they had eyed so many times. I opened it slowly and pulled out a single envelope, cream-colored, heavier than it looked. I placed it on the table between us. "What's that?" Livia asked. "A copy of the legal actions already taken," I said. "A trust, a medical directive, a power of attorney assigned to someone who isn't either of you, all filed, all active." Their faces drained of color. You did this without telling us," Adam whispered. "Yes," I said, "and that is precisely why it will hold." Livia's breath hitched. "You don't trust us." I met her eyes calmly. "You made sure of that." Adam opened the envelope with shaking hands, scanning the documents, growing paler with each line. This can't be." "It is." Livia stood abruptly. "You're punishing us." "No," I said. "I'm protecting myself." She stared at me as if seeing me for the first time, not as the fragile woman they hoped I had become, but as the mother who had raised them with a spine they had forgotten existed. Adam swallowed hard. "You've ruined everything." "No," I said softly. "I've preserved what matters." The room fell silent. Not the silence of confusion, not the silence of anger, the silence of truth settling into place. They thought I would break, but it was my turn to watch something crack. Not me, them. They didn't leave right away. People don't walk out the moment their intentions are exposed. They linger, hoping the truth will soften if they stare at it long enough. Adam stood with the papers trembling in his hands, eyes darting from line to line as though the words might rearrange themselves into something more forgiving. Livia remained perfectly still, shoulders rigid, breathing shallow. Shock has many shapes. Hers was anger wearing a thin veil of disbelief. "Who helped you do this?" she finally asked. The question wasn't about logistics. It was about control, about who had dared remove me from the orbit they believed I couldn't live without. "I helped myself," I said. Livia shook her head. "No. Someone advised you. Someone filled your head with what?" I asked gently. "With the idea that I have the right to my own life?" She flinched, just a flicker, but I saw it. Adam lowered the papers. "Mom, why would you do this to your own children?" I almost laughed, quietly, bitterly. They still believed this story was about them. "I didn't do anything to you," I said. "I simply stopped allowing things to be done to me." He ran a hand through his hair, pacing. "You've always trusted us. What changed?" "You did." Another silence. This one colder, denser. It pressed against the walls, against our faces, against the years between us. Livia stepped closer, lowering her voice into something soft, something almost tender. "Mother, you're making a terrible mistake. You're burning bridges you can't rebuild." I met her gaze evenly. Some bridges should never have been crossed to begin with. For a moment, something flickered in her eyes. Grief, maybe. Or the faint understanding that she had pushed too hard, too long, and now the ground beneath her had vanished. Adam wasn't as graceful. "So that's it?" he snapped. "You're cutting us out? After everything we've done for you?" My heart tightened. Not because of guilt, but because of how honestly he believed his own version of the past. "You haven't done things for me," I said softly. "You've done things because of me. There's a difference." He opened his mouth, but no words came. I continued. "I raised you. I fed you. I buried your father alone while you built careers and new families. I gave until giving became the only language I remembered. I placed my hand on the folder. But your mistake was assuming I had forgotten any other language. Livia's composure finally cracked. We were trying to protect what's ours. There it was. The truest sentence she had spoken in months. Nothing here is yours, I said. Her eyes widened, not in anger, but in something like recognition. She understood then that the ground had shifted in a way she could not reverse. Adam took a step back. So, what now? We just accept this? You accept whatever you choose, I said. But none of your choices will change mine. The clock ticked behind us, steady, calm, the metronome of a house reclaiming its rhythm. Eventually, Livia reached for her coat. Adam gathered the scattered documents with motions that were stiff and jerking, as if the papers themselves stung him. At the door, Livia paused. Mother, you'll regret this. I shook my head. No. I regret waiting so long. She looked at me for a long moment, really looked, and for the first time, I saw uncertainty there. Not guilt, not remorse, just the dawning realization that I was no longer someone she could move like a piece on her board. They left without another word. When their cars disappeared into the night, the house exhaled, long and low, like an old animal settling after a storm. I closed the door gently. It was done. Not finished, not yet. There were still steps to take, still papers to finalize, still a life to rebuild. But the breaking was over. Now came the choosing. The morning after they left felt different from any other morning in years. Not lighter. Lightness belongs to youth. But clearer. As if the fog that had settled around my life, softening the edges, had finally lifted. For the first time in a long while, I could see the day ahead without bracing for someone else's shadow. The house was silent, but not the brittle, wounded silence it had carried in the weeks before. This was a peaceful quiet, the kind that settles after a storm passes and takes all the debris with it. I walked through each room slowly, letting my fingers drift along the familiar surfaces. Not to say goodbye, not yet, but to acknowledge that something fundamental had been restored. My dignity, my belonging to myself, my right to stay whole. I boiled water for tea, listening to the kettle's soft rumble. Henry used to say that tea reveals a person's true state of mind. You can't hide from yourself while waiting for water to boil. Standing there, in that small pause between heat and stillness, I felt no bitterness, not even triumph, just a quiet certainty that the choices I had made were the right ones. By noon, I had pulled out the final forms Mr. Porter and I had discussed, the trust documents, the revised will, the letter of revocation that removed Adam and Livia from any future legal claim over my decisions. Each page was clear, clean, final. I signed them with a steady hand. In that act, I felt something inside me shift. Not a snap, not a wound, but an exhale. A release of the version of me my children tried so hard to insist upon. A woman fading, a woman slipping, a woman who needed to be managed. I had never been her. I was simply quiet, and they mistook quiet for weakness. When the courier came to collect the envelope, he smiled politely and made a small joke about the weather. I smiled back. A simple exchange, ordinary. But it reminded me how rare it had become to speak with someone who asked nothing of me, who saw me as a person, not a problem. After he left, I sat on the porch with my coat wrapped around me. The pear tree in the yard stood bare, its branches reaching upward like the arms of an old friend stretching after a long sleep. Winter light lay across it softly, without accusation. I thought of Adam and Livia, not with anger, but with that deep, settled sadness that comes from understanding someone too well. They weren't monsters. They were frightened, greedy, short-sighted. They believed age was the same as surrender. But age is not surrender. Age is refinement. A sharpening, if you let it be. In the late afternoon, I walked through the house one last time with a different intention. I took down a few photographs, placed them in boxes, folded Henry's cardigan carefully. Not because I was fleeing, no. Because I was choosing the next chapter of my life. The papers were signed. The trust was sealed. The house would soon be listed. And I had already found a small cottage near the coast. Nothing grand, nothing loud. Just a place where the mornings belonged to me, and the salt wind could slip through the windows without asking permission. Standing in the living room, I whispered, "Thank you." Though I wasn't sure to whom. The house, perhaps. Or Henry. Or the version of myself who had survived far more than anyone knew. Evening settled in slow, silver strokes. I made one last cup of tea in this kitchen and sat at the table where so much had happened in silence. The ceramic felt warm beneath my palms. I breathed, and then I spoke aloud. Not for them, but for the women like me who carry their lives quietly until the moment comes to reclaim them. They waited for me to die so they could inherit. But I waited for them to lie so I could finally live. I lifted my cup, steady as the tide. "And now," I whispered, "I will. If you felt this story, if it touched something quiet and familiar inside you, share it, tell it, let it travel. There is always another woman who needs to hear she is not powerless."
H1. Stop right now. I just read this title and I am speechless. They waited for me to die so they could inherit. I waited for them to lie. This is chess. This is 4D chess. This is strategic thinking at a level that makes Machiavelli look like an amateur. This is someone who knew their family was waiting for them to die so they could get their hands on the inheritance. And instead of just being hurt or angry or confrontational, they waited. They waited for the perfect moment. They waited for their family to expose themselves through their own lies. And then, presumably, they struck. The symmetry of this title is perfection. They waited for me to die versus I waited for them to lie. It's mirrored. It's poetic. It's justice in its purest form. The family was patient in their greed, waiting for death. The victim was patient in their strategy, waiting for lies. Both sides playing the long game, but only one side playing with truth and righteousness. Let me break this down because every single word is loaded with implications. They waited for me to die. They, multiple people. This is not one greedy relative. This is a conspiracy. This is multiple family members, children, maybe grandchildren, maybe siblings, maybe in-laws, all united in their eagerness for this person to die so they can get their inheritance. Think about that. Waited. Not hoped passively. Not just anticipated. Waited. That implies active anticipation. That implies checking in, not out of love, but to see if death is close. That implies conversations among themselves about when it happens. That implies planning for a future where this person is dead, while the person is still alive and presumably able to hear, see, or sense this energy. For me to die. The person making this video is talking about their own death. They're talking about family members waiting for them to die, not waiting for them to get better. not waiting to spend more time with them, not waiting to make amends or share meaningful moments, waiting for death. Because death means money. Death means inheritance. Death means the thing they've been waiting for finally arrives. Can you imagine knowing that? Can you imagine being aware that your family views your continued existence as an obstacle to their financial gain? That every day you stay alive is a day they're frustrated because they're not getting their money yet. That's not just hurtful. That's dehumanizing. That's being reduced to a financial asset that hasn't liquidated yet, so they could inherit. There it is, the motive, the reason for their death waiting. Inheritance, money, property, assets, possessions. The family isn't grieving the thought of losing this person. They're anticipating what they'll gain when the person is gone. They've probably already decided who gets what. They've probably already argued about the division of assets. They've probably already spent the money, mentally. And they're probably pretending to care. Visiting occasionally, making small talk, asking about health out of concern, but really just assessing how close death might be. Putting on performances of being loving family while internally counting down to payday. That's insidious. That's wearing a mask of care while harboring greed. But here's where it gets brilliant. I waited for them to lie. The person knew. They knew what the family was doing. They knew about the greed and the death waiting and the inheritance anticipation. And instead of confronting them immediately, instead of cutting them off emotionally or financially, they made a strategic decision. They waited. They played their own long game. They let the family think they were getting away with their scheme. They let the family get comfortable in their deception. They let the family dig themselves deeper. Because they knew that if given enough rope, the family would hang themselves through their own lies. For them to lie. This is the trap. The person wasn't just passively observing. They were actively waiting for a specific thing to happen. They were waiting for the family to lie. Maybe about their intentions. Maybe about their feelings. Maybe about their finances. Maybe about the person's health or mental state. Maybe about what the person supposedly said or wanted. Whatever the lie was, the person knew it was coming, and they were ready for it. This tells me several things about this person. First, they're smart. They understand human nature. They know that greedy people will eventually lie to serve their greed. They know that people who are waiting for you to die so they can inherit will eventually slip up and reveal their true nature through lies. Second, they're patient. They didn't react immediately when they discovered the family's greed. They didn't blow up or make emotional decisions. They waited. They let the situation develop. They gave the family time and space to make mistakes. Third, they're strategic. This isn't just about being hurt or getting revenge. This is about setting a trap. This is about creating a situation where the family's own behavior provides the evidence needed to justify whatever consequences are coming. Fourth, they're powerful. Because you can only execute a plan like this if you have agency. If you have control over your assets and your legal affairs. If you have mental clarity and capability. The family was waiting for this person to die, presumably thinking they were weak or declining. But this person is sharp enough to orchestrate a complex, strategic response. Now let's talk about what lie they were waiting for. Because that's the key. What kind of lie would be significant enough to serve as the trigger for whatever this person has planned? Let me speculate on possibilities. Possibility 1. Lies about the person's capacity. Maybe the family lied about the person being mentally incompetent or unable to make their own decisions. Maybe they told doctors, lawyers, or other family members that the person has dementia or can't think clearly. This would be grounds for guardianship or power of attorney. And if the person can prove those are lies by demonstrating their capability, that's powerful evidence of the family's malicious intent. End quote. Possibility 2. Lies about the person's wishes. Maybe the family told people, "Mom, Dad wants us to have the house," or they said they want the money divided this way, when that's not true. Maybe they forged documents or misrepresented conversations. If the person has proof that these are lies, recordings, witnesses, documentation, that's grounds for legal action and estate revision. Possibility 3. Lies to financial institutions. Maybe the family tried to access accounts or assets by lying to banks or investment firms. "We have power of attorney," when they don't. The account holder authorized this, when they didn't. Financial fraud leaves paper trails, and if the person was waiting for this to happen so they could catch them, that's criminal evidence. Possibility 4. Lies to other family members. Maybe the family has been telling lies to turn other relatives against the person, or to consolidate their own position as the caring ones who should inherit everything. If the person has been gathering evidence of these lies, they can expose the manipulators to the entire family. Possibility 5. Lies about their own motives. Maybe the family has been saying, "We just want to help," or "We care about you so much," while their actions show they're only interested in inheritance. If the person can demonstrate the gap between what they say and what they do, that hypocrisy becomes undeniable. Any of these lies would be sufficient to trigger whatever plan this person has prepared. And the fact that they waited for the lies, rather than just reacting to the death waiting, shows sophisticated, strategic thinking. Let me talk about the emotional journey this person must have gone through. First, there's the discovery. Finding out that your family is eagerly awaiting your death so they can inherit. That moment of realization must be devastating. It's a betrayal that cuts to the core. These are people you loved, raised, cared for, provided for, and they're viewing you as an obstacle to money. Then there's the hurt. Deep, profound pain at being reduced to a dollar sign. At knowing your value to your family is purely financial. At understanding that they're not visiting because they love you, but because they're monitoring their investment. That hurt is real and valid. Then probably comes anger. Righteous fury at the disrespect, the greed, the dehumanization. How dare they? After everything you've done for them, after all the sacrifices and support, this is how they see you. That anger is fuel. But then, and this is where it gets brilliant, comes strategic thinking. Instead of just reacting emotionally, instead of lashing out or cutting everyone off, this person made a decision. Okay, they want to play games? I'll play games. But I'll play smarter. They shifted from victim to strategist. They started observing rather than just feeling. They started documenting rather than just suffering. They started planning rather than just reacting. That's taking control. That's transforming pain into power. And the decision to wait for them to lie, that's genius. Because lies are evidence. Lies can be proven false. Lies create legal liability. Lies expose character. By waiting for the family to lie, this person is building a case. They're gathering ammunition. They're creating undeniable proof of the family's bad faith. Now let's think about the trap itself. How does someone set up a situation where they're waiting for family to lie? You have to create opportunities for lying while remaining vigilant to catch the lies when they happen. Maybe the person pretended to be more incapacitated than they actually were. Letting family think they're confused or forgetful, when actually they're sharp and aware. Then when family members tell people, "Oh, Mom, Dad is really declining," they don't know what they're saying. The person can demonstrate that's a lie. Maybe the person planted false information and waited to see if family members would exploit it. I mentioned having a valuable asset and then waited to see if they'd try to access it without permission. When they did, boom, caught in a lie about having authorization. Maybe the person set up surveillance or recording devices, where legal, to capture family members talking among themselves, saying things like, "I can't wait until they die, so we can get the money," or, "Let's tell the lawyer this, even though it's not true." Direct evidence of their true intentions and their willingness to lie. Maybe the person consulted with lawyers and financial advisors who could testify about what the person actually said versus what family claims they said, creating an official record that contradicts the family's lies. Maybe the person tested family members by asking them direct questions and seeing if they'd lie. "Do you care about me or just my money?" And when they lie and say, "Of course we care about you, money doesn't matter," while their actions show otherwise, that's documented hypocrisy. Whatever the specific trap, it required planning. It required patience. It required discipline to not reveal what you know while you're waiting for the right moment. That's incredibly difficult when you're emotionally wounded by the very people you're investigating. Let's talk about the legal implications, because this person has probably been preparing legal consequences for the family. Estate law is complex and heavily favors the autonomy of the property owner while they're alive. This person, being alive and competent, has full control over their estate, and they've probably been making changes. They've probably revised their will to exclude or minimize inheritance for the greedy family members, documented the reasons for these changes, including evidence of the family's greed and lies, consulted with estate lawyers to make sure everything is ironclad and challenge-proof, possibly created trusts or structures that make it harder for family to contest, gathered evidence of lies that could be used if family tries to challenge the estate, prepared testimony or statements explaining their decisions. And when this person does eventually die, because we all do, the family is going to get a shock. They've been waiting for the inheritance. They've been planning how to spend it, and then the will is read, and they discover they're getting nothing, or significantly less than expected. And if they try to challenge it, all that evidence of their lies and their greed waiting comes out in court. That's the long game. That's revenge served not hot or cold, but legally binding. But wait, this person is making a video about this, which means they're presumably still alive, which means the trap might have already been sprung. The family might have already lied. The person might have already caught them. And now they're going public with the story. That adds another dimension, public shaming. Not only are there legal consequences and financial consequences, but now there's social consequences. The family's greed and lies are being exposed to potentially thousands or millions of people. Their reputation is being destroyed publicly. That's a consequence that extends beyond just money. Let me talk about inheritance culture, because that's really what's underlying this whole situation. We live in a society where people feel entitled to inherit from their parents or older relatives. There's this expectation that wealth should pass down through generations, and that expectation can create ugly dynamics.